Please pray with me. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of each heart be acceptable in your sight. For you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Oh my goodness gracious. It's talking about greed. Talking about abundance. Talking about so many of the things that so many of us are reluctant to talk about, to be honest. And this time, it's prompted by a pretty ordinary thing. You see, Jesus is asked to settle a dispute. Rabbis were traditionally in Jesus' time asked to settle disputes, so it wasn't unusual. But the way Jesus answered was very unusual. He said, "Who put me above you to settle this dispute?" As we were discussing this reading in our pods, Principles of Discipleship Bible Study groups, we speculated, because that's all you can do when you don't know the facts. You speculate about this dude, what he was like, and why he came to Jesus. Oh, we talked about the fact that his brother had an affair with him. We talked about all this stuff. But several people honed in on one thing. Maybe Jesus looked inside of him and knew his heart. And knew that he didn't want to be fairly treated. He wanted more. And we got to talking about what's our responsibility as people today. How do we plan for the future? How do we make sure our families are taken care of? How do we provide adequately? We talked about the fact that probably one of the kindest things you can do for your family, and I'm going to say this to everybody, some of you have already done it, and I thank you for that, is plan ahead. So, I'm just going to ask that you do not have to raise your hand. How many of you have planned your funeral? Oh, I know you don't want to talk about it. But I'm telling you, a member of our congregation died some time ago, and she had come and met with me, and she picked every song, every reading, everything was done. And it was the easiest funeral I'd ever conducted. So how many of you have really done that? I don't know about you, but here's the one thing I do know that Elizabeth, my wife of almost 30 years, has told me: we are not allowed to sing Amazing Grace. She keeps changing the song she wants us to sing, but that has always remained consistent. Unless John Denver comes back and sings it, she would be okay with that, I think. So I say that because we are a society that sometimes, I'm just saying sometimes, we don't like to think about the future too much. In fact, so many people today are living day to day. The very last thing they can do is plan for the future. I don't know if you've seen the commercials, but maybe you have, that talk about planning for retirement and when you're supposed to do that. Well, I am so far behind, it's ridiculous. And I look at it, I thought, oh, I should have started doing that 30 years ago. I didn't do it, so I guess I have to live with whatever happens. So many of us really maybe don't want to think about dying, or think about our retirement, or think about having to make changes. And just maybe some of us are still a product of the Depression. Not that any of us were alive during it, not even me. But I was raised by my mom and dad were in the Depression. They had the little cards, you know, the ration cards. And they showed them to me, they explained to me about all this stuff. And my father, my mother did not work, she stayed at home with us, but my father did not believe in putting money in banks, and he did not believe in any kind of credit cards. The one thing my father told me as I was growing up, and it's kind of ironic that he said it when I see what's happening now, he says the one thing they're not making any more of is land. You need to invest in land. Of course, now, if you know anything about the mitigations that are taking place, if you see a body of water and you want to make a land out of it, you just fill it all in and it becomes land. But back then, that's what Daddy told me. So I have to admit that finally Mother talked him into a checking account because he was away so much. He was a tugboat captain. So Mother took care of all the bills. I don't think he could have ever taken care of bills. Wasn't what he did. Mother planned for everything. And you know, I'm kind of like in turmoil to a certain extent. My father didn't have a will. That's how much he was in denial about dying. And my mother's will was somehow lost, and I'm not even going to go into what I think happened. But if you haven't done your will, I'm just telling you right now, do it, please, because what happens to families when there isn't one is really tragic. And I think about that, and then I think about where we are in our day-to-day living. I think about, and my personal turmoil is, how much do I want to accumulate? How much do I want to have? And I'll be honest and tell you that we have too much. And when you look around our communities and you see new storage buildings being built everywhere. Now, I know people in apartments don't have a lot of storage. I'm okay with that. But when you see those of us who have homes, and some people who actually have a garage, we do not, but where their cars can't go into it because it's filled with stuff. And then if you're like us, we have a room, which shall remain nameless, which is where things go. They go into this room, and, oh no, do you have a room like that? Oh, you have a room like that. So you know, anything that you don't quite know where to put or what to do with goes into the room. And pretty soon the room is full. Now, it has been my experience, as I've talked to people, that people are in a kind of same turmoil I'm in, because this passage, this parable, speaks to accumulating stuff and not being ready when your time's up. And having all this stuff, and this guy in the parable is really cool, because he says, whoa, look, I don't have to work for a long time. Wouldn't that be cool? I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm just going to have the best old time because I got it all put away. This is one of the few parables, hear this, where Jesus says God talks. That hardly ever happens in a parable. But in this parable, Jesus says, and God said to him, fool, your soul is going to be required of you today. And who gets what you've put away? I have to tell you that it's a problem for me. It's a problem for me when I talk to people. How much stuff do you need? When is enough enough? What do you do? How do you handle abundance in your life? Well, I like to try to tell you something that's easy. I don't want you to have to work too hard to do what you need to do to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and a child of God. Here's what you have to do. In everything you do, in everything you have to love God back. See, it's that simple. I know the time was around some years ago when the big question was, what would Jesus do? Now, I don't know if people are still asking that question. I often still ask it of myself. But when it comes to your stuff, when it comes to what you have and what you do with it, when it comes to what you give and what you do to help others, I think the question can be very simple. How is this going to show God my love? How is this going to pay God back for the incredible generosity which is everything we have? How do we love God back? Loving God back basically means God would look down and say, yeah, that's a good decision. You're doing the right thing. Just like God spoke to this rich person in the parable and said, fool, like you don't have a clue, do you? And often a parable is received so differently by the people who hear it. In Jewish tradition, if you had an abundance of crop, you were obligated by Jewish law to share it with the poor. Some of you may remember the story of Ruth. The person she ended up marrying, Boaz, had fields, abundant fields. And when the crops were taken in, Boaz allowed everyone from the community who needed to come in there and pick up the extras. Basically, he took care of his crops, and then he said, go for it. And it was Ruth who came into that field to get grain to be able to make bread for her household. You see, that was the way Jews handled it back then. When you had a wonderful crop, you made sure everybody benefited. You didn't tear down and build bigger barns and not support those in need. Gandhi, I believe it was, said, there is enough on earth to satisfy everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. And you've heard me say it before. There's enough on this planet for everyone. There's enough, particularly in the United States of America, for everyone. So how do we handle it? What do we do? Okay? I could talk to you about people we should support, organizations that are doing a good job. I can talk to you about that, but you know what? The simple thing is, what you do has to show your love of God. You have to love God back. And everything we do needs to be taken under that umbrella of consideration. How is this loving God back? And it's not just about possessions or money. It's about actions. About things we do and things we don't do. It's about people we talk to and people we don't talk to. It's about the judgments we make of people without knowing them at all. Maybe you saw the news and maybe you heard. But as I listened to it on the radio, I thought, that's how you love God back. And it wasn't even from Christians. The priest whose throat was cut. The Muslims in that community went to the Catholic churches to show their solidarity, to show their love of God. The God they love is the same God we love. And to have them do that just touched my heart. You see, they loved God back by showing their love and support for people just like them who had suffered a tragic loss. I think about this often, how we really don't know each other. I'm not talking about people of different faiths or people in different communities. I'm talking about right here in this room, about how well we know each other and what we can do for one another. To love God back, we have to do everything we can. But here's the tricky part. I can't do something for you if I don't know your need. This church can't do something for you if they do not know your need. I tell people all the time, tell us what you need. There's something going on in your life, speak it, talk about it. And it's not just about needing things, it's about needing a hug. Someone in our congregation who very rarely makes it to church text and say, I'm going to try to come by Bible study this week because I need a hug. I need a hug. She lost a dear friend of over 30 years. And she just wanted a hug. She didn't make it. She had to leave to go down and take care of the ashes of this person. But I talked to her on the phone, and I said, you know, our prayers are with you. She said, yes, I do know that. she said, even though I didn't get the hug, I knew those of you at Bible study were praying for me and for my friend. And she said it meant the world to me. See, that's the kind of stuff that people need sometimes. Just to know people are thinking about them, praying for them, supporting them in whatever way they need. That's how we love God back. Of course, let's be honest, we can never pay back God enough for all God's given us. It just can't be. We can't do it. But we can try to show God how grateful we are in all kinds of ways. So I'm just going to throw a couple of things out for you because, like I said, I want to keep it pretty simple. We need people to help with our JAM program. Our children are precious to us. Whether they're little people or older people, all of our children are our future. And we need to make sure they get what they need, especially when they come here. So pray about it. Maybe that's one way you might be able to love God better. And pray about the many organizations and things that are going on right here at church. Pray about how you might fit in, how you might help with Friends in the Woods, how you might help with the various ministries we have. It's a way to love God back. You know, so often I believe people just sit back. Do you know anybody like this, by the way? Sit back and just expect everything to be done for them. I have to tell you, I grew up with that attitude. Because I had a mom, as I said, never worked. I never made a bed until I went to college. I had to ask how to do that because, you know, we had twin beds in the dorms and folding, and that was very complicated to me. I never, no, you're laughing because there are other people just like me. I know. I never did laundry. I didn't know how to do a washing machine, let alone a dryer, because we grew up hanging stuff outside, which I didn't know how to do. That I could handle. So much of the way I was raised, I was spoiled, and I didn't know I was being spoiled. I had no idea I was being spoiled. We were not a rich family, but I had everything I needed. And most of what I wanted, except for the pony, but I won't even go. So I was spoiled. And so when I got out into the world and started seeing reality, I realized how blessed I had been. And what I wanted to do was to show my parents how grateful I was. Now multiply that by 1,000,000. That's what God's done for us. And I hope you feel like you want to show God how grateful you are. Please pray with me. God, we come to you as people who are blessed. Yes, we are. We're in a country that has been blessed. Yes, it has. And right now, God, we're just going to ask you to help us. Help us by, first of all, giving us opportunities to show how grateful we are. And then, God, give us the courage, maybe the desire to give back. To give back to you by giving back to others. And God, we thank you, as always, for everything. Amen. Amen.